Haki turned one-piece fights into a raw power contest, while the smartest combat system, Rokushiki, got left behind.
So what if the most powerful, brilliant combat system in one of the world's biggest stories has just been completely overshadowed by, flashy, boring magic?
It's a massive narrative tragedy, really. And we look at the sheer scale of the One Piece universe, and we're just watching how its most brutal, purely skill-based martial art was basically pushed off stage.
Right.
We're seeing a discipline that was born from agonizing physical suffering just being forgotten. And it's all in favor of what has honestly devolved into a dry industrial metric of power.
Yeah, if you're a longtime fan, you probably remember that visceral feeling of the early fights, right?
Yeah.
The desperation, the tactics. So welcome to today's deep dive. We're unpacking a really fascinating breakdown of how combat in this massive pop culture juggernaut has evolved.
Or devolved, really.
Exactly, devolved. We're exploring how those early, highly creative, puzzle-like brawls slowly turned into a literal stat check. And more importantly, we're going to pull back the curtain on why Rokushiki, the Six Powers, is actually the absolute untouchable peak of the series' combat design.
Right, and to really grasp the magnitude of this shift, we have to look at the mechanical foundation of the story's early era. Combat used to be a visceral puzzle.
Yeah.
You didn't win just because you had the highest power level or, hit the hardest. You won because you outsmarted the opponent. You had to physically exploit the specific elemental weaknesses of their devil fruits.
Right, like think back to Alabasta. Crocodile is Logia, right? He's made of sand. So physical attacks just pass right through him.
Exactly.
In the modern era of the story, a character would just, coat their fist in hockey and punch him. But back then, Luffy had to figure out the actual physics of sand. He realizes sand clumps together when it gets wet.
Which leads to that incredible moment.
Yes, that incredibly raw moment where, completely out of options, Luffy just covers his fists in his own dripping blood just to make physical contact. It grounded the magic system in tangible reality.
It was desperate, and it was brilliant. I mean, we saw that exact same tactical necessity when Luffy's rubber physiology naturally grounded Enel's lightning. Or when characters had to figure out the spatial limitations of Doflamingo's puppeteer strings. You had to use your brain. But the analysis we're looking at today points out this massive, sweeping shift in how battles are constructed now. Today, the absolute strongest characters rely almost entirely on Haki.
And look, Hakeki was necessary. It was introduced to balance the scales so normal martial artists could actually hit those untouchable elemental Loju users. But it kind of metastasized, didn't it?
Completely. It became the only thing that mattered. It basically turned vibrant, chaotic battles into a spreadsheet calculation.
A spreadsheet, yeah.
The wild clash of ideologies and elements just got reduced to a very simple math problem whose haki is heavier. If your willpower is denser, you win. The magic has literally been drained out of the choreography.
It sounds exactly like a video game balancing problem. The early fights were this incredibly nuanced, high-stakes game of rock, paper, scissors. You had to look at your opponent's scissors and scramble to find a rock. But the new Hakeki fights, it's just two people smashing increasingly larger rocks together to see whose rock breaks first. It's just an arms race of raw, blunt trauma. Like, look at the Emperors.
Oh, Kaido is the perfect example.
Yeah, Kaido doesn't outmaneuver anyone. He just swings a club overflowing with Conqueror's haki and one-shots his opponent. Or Shanks, who wipes out Kid's entire crew with a single haki-coated sword swing.
It looks visually spectacular, sure.
Yeah, the sky splits open, it looks cool, but it completely lacks the unpredictable spark of the early Grand Line. Everyone at the top tier just uses the same three tools armament to hit hard, observation to dodge, and conquerors to just overwhelm.
Which brings us to the antidote to this power creep, the introduction of the alternative Rokushiki. Think about the entry requirements for the other power system.
Okay.
Devil fruits require the sheer dumb luck of finding and eating a rare mystical fruit, right? And Haki relies heavily on genetic potential or being born with an innate 1,000,000-to-1 conqueror spirit. But Rokushiki is absolute fairness.
Wait, hold on. Fairness. You're talking about a martial arts system engineered by a corrupt, authoritarian world government to turn their intelligence agencies into meat grinders. How is that fair?
Well, it is fair in the sense that it doesn't care about your bloodline, and it doesn't care about destiny. The underlying philosophy of the six powers is sheer biological taxation.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It's an extreme application of gym theory. Like, how do you build muscle? You lift heavy weights to literally tear your muscle fibers, forcing the body to repair them stronger than before. Mokushiki takes that biological reality and pushes it past the edge of human limits.
So you're just breaking your body down.
Over and over and over again in the most agonizing ways imaginable until the flesh itself is forced to evolve just to survive the stress.
So the training is so intensely painful that it builds an ironclad mental toughness alongside the physical density. You aren't just callousing your knuckles, you are callousing your central nervous system.
Precisely. And this is exactly why the world government relies on it. They have an entire global ocean to police. They cannot afford to procure a rare, prohibitively expensive devil fruit for every single Marine.
Right, that would bankrupt them.
Exactly, and they certainly can't line up thousands of troops and command them to magically awaken Hakaki, but through strictly enforced systemic discipline, they can mass produce an industrial assembly line of super soldiers. They strip away the reliance on miracles, they manufacture weapons out of ordinary human flesh.
So in a world overflowing with demigods, with, Nepo babies carrying royal bloodlines and people who literally ate magical sea fruit, this is the ultimate pull yourself up by your bootstraps method.
It really is.
It's the only way for a complete nobody to physically condition themselves to stand toe-to-toe with monsters.
It is the triumph of human endeavor over divine right. And there is a profound aesthetic perfection to it, actually. The author of these notes compares it to Michelangelo's David.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, when you look at that statue, every single muscle and tendon is chiseled with deliberate purpose. When you see a master of Rokushiki like Rob Lucci standing perfectly still, you aren't looking at a man holding a weapon. You are looking at a man whose very anatomy has been reforged into an arsenal.
But wait, if they don't use weapons, how are they actually projecting lethal force? Like, how does human flesh compete with a sword or a bullet? I really want to dig into the biomechanics of this, because when you look at the six powers together, they create this flawless, self-sustaining combat loop.
Yeah, let's examine the physics of that loop. Starting with the offense, you have Shigon, the finger pistol.
Yeah.
The user strikes with their index finger, but it's really about the concentration of kinetic energy into a microscopic surface area.
Right, so it hits like a bullet.
Exactly. They strike at such blinding speed that the sheer force pierces human flesh and bone exactly like a lead bullet. Then there is Rankyaku, the Tempest kick. This is pure aerodynamic.
That's the ranged one, right?
Yeah. It's a kick so fast and powerful it creates a massive razor-sharp vacuum blade of compressed air pressure that travels across the battlefield. It's capable of slicing through stone buildings.
So you have your close-range piercing and your long-range slashing. But defensively, it's just as wild. You have Tekai, the Iron Mass. The user flexes their muscles so tightly, accelerating their blood flow to contract their muscles with such absolute control that their body literally takes on the density of steel. They can stand completely still and tank a crushing blow.
But Tekai is inherently rigid. It roots you to the spot. So to balance it, the system incorporates Kami, the paper arts. The user entirely relaxes their body, going completely limp.
Like actual paper.
Right. They use the very air currents generated by the opponent's incoming attacks to blow them out of the way. They just flutter around lethal strikes like a piece of paper in the wind. It is the yin to Tekai's yang. Total rigidity versus total fluidity.
And to tie it all together, there are the movement techniques. Soru, or shave. Kicking the ground dozens of times in the blink of an eye, generating explosive kinetic energy to move at instantaneous, blinding speeds. You literally vanish from the optical processing of a normal human eye.
It's essentially teleportation to a normal person.
Yeah. And finally, Geppo, the moonwalk. Kicking the air itself with such concentrated force that you compress it into a temporary solid platform. It allows you to fly and completely control the vertical space of the battlefield.
Now, picture the strategic loop this creates for a truly optimized master. They can kite a devastating opponent from a safe distance, launching barrage after barrage of Rankyaku air blades.
Right.
The moment the opponent stumbles, they use Soru to cross the battlefield instantly, appearing right in their blind spot, and finish them with a lethal Shigen to the brainstem.
That is brutal.
And defensively, if an enemy tries a precision strike, they use Kami-E to flow around the blow. If the enemy unleashes a massive, unavoidable area of effect explosion, they harden with Tekai and just walk right through the fire.
It's a closed, perfect circle of combat. But I have to call a timeout here. If this system is an impenetrable, perfect loop, Why did CP9 get their teeth kicked in by a bunch of pirate teenagers at Eni's lobby?
That's the million-dollar question.
Did they just suck at their own martial art?
Yeah.
Because you're describing a perfect machine, but when we saw them fight, they were getting hit left and right.
That is the crucial flaw in how the world government taught it. The assassins of CP9 were incredibly arrogant. They treated these techniques as separate parlor tricks rather than a unified fluid system.
Ah, I see.
You'd see them use the rigid Takai to try and block a piercing attack that they really should have dodged with Kami, or they'd try to dodge a massive shockwave instead of bracing for it. They didn't synergize.
They relied on their raw physical stats instead of the tactical application of the art.
Exactly. Which raises a terrifying hypothetical. What if someone actually optimized these combinations perfectly? What if they didn't just use them in isolation but strung them together flawlessly? If Rob Lucci had fought with perfect optimization, dynamically shifting between Kami and Tekai mid-strike, he wouldn't just be an intelligence operative, he would practically be the main character.
And that transitions us into what I think is the most mind-blowing part of this analysis, the ultimate what-ifs. Because the argument here isn't that Rokushiki should replace Devil Fruits or Haki. The argument is that Rokushiki is the ultimate multiplier for them.
It is the anatomical foundation upon which true monstrosities are built. Let's look at the synergies with Devil Fruits, starting with the Logi class, the elemental users. Take Admiral Akainu, made of living magma. Think back to Marineford.
Yeah.
There is that traumatizing scene where Luffy's brother, Ace, and Jinbe have to physically throw their bodies in front of Akainu's magma fist to save Luffy. It takes crucial seconds for Akainu to walk across the ice.
But imagine that exact scene if Akainu had mastered Soru, the explosive speed. Ace and Jinbe are running to intercept, but with a single pop of displaced air, Akainu just teleports.
Yeah.
He crosses the distance instantaneously. He appears directly in front of Luffy before Ace can even take a breath, and the story ends right there. Or imagine Akainu launching a Rankyaku kick, but instead of a standard vacuum blade, he launches a massive crescent of searing, explosive magma slicing across the sky.
It transforms a slow, overwhelming force into an omnipresent, inescapable executioner. Now, consider the Paramecia class fruits that alter the user's body or environment. The notes bring up Nico Robin.
Oh, this part was crazy.
Right. She can sprout her limbs anywhere within her line of sight. Normally, she sprouts arms to grapple or twist her opponent's joints, but apply Shigan to her physiology.
Oh, the biomechanics of this are just like nightmare fuel. Picture a massive battlefield, hundreds of enemy marines charged. Robin doesn't need to overextend herself grappling them. She just crosses her arms. Instantly, right in the blind spot at the very base of hundreds of skulls, a single index finger sprouts. And with the concentrated kinetic force of a bullet, it strikes the brainstem. It's a flawless, instantaneous mass assassination. It's elegant, silent, and utterly terrifying.
She goes from being a crowd control fighter to an omnidirectional sniper. And finally, the Zoan fruits, the animal transformations. These are pure physical enhancers, making them the most natural fit for Rokushiki.
Like Lucci's leopard form.
Right. His leopard form doesn't just make him stronger, it gives him digitigrade animal legs, fundamentally altering the leverage of his Soru to make it blazingly fast. It gives him claws, turning his Shigen from a bullet into a shredding spear.
And Kaku.
Yes, Kaku, who turns into a giraffe. He uses the massive centrifugal force of his long neck to spin his body like a top, unleashing a tornado of Rankyaku air blades that shear through a stone tower like butter.
Rokushiki basically patches every single physical vulnerability that the magic system leaves behind. If a devil fruit makes you a glass cannon, Rokushiki turns you into an armored personnel carrier. But what about the current meta? What about Haki?
That's the real question.
What happens when the peak of physical muscle meets the peak of spiritual willpower?
That is where we reach the summit of theoretical power in this universe. Think of the ultimate hidden Rokushiki technique, the Rokugan, the Six King Gun. It is a dual-fisted strike that generates a devastating, localized shockwave of compressed air.
Right.
And it's designed to bypass exterior armor and violently rupture the internal organs directly.
It's essentially a physical concussive blast right into your liver.
Exactly. Now imagine wrapping that compressed air shockwave in advanced armament Haki. Advanced armament already has the property of projecting spiritual force into a target to destroy it from the inside out.
Oh man, the compounding internal pressure. You're hitting the internal organs with a physical shockwave of compressed air and simultaneously detonating a spiritual bomb of Haki inside their veins.
The author argues that a strike like that would be so catastrophic that even Kaido, a dragon literally famous for having impenetrable, indestructible scales, would be flattened. You wouldn't need to cut his scales, you would just turn his internal organs to liquid.
It's turning a martial arts strike into a tactical nuke.
And defensively. Defensively, you layer an invisible aura of armament Haki over a body that is already using Takai to become as dense as steel. You create an impenetrable two-layer vault.
That's insane.
Even if an opponent's Haki is stronger than yours and manages to pierce your spiritual armor, the kinetic force of their blow will still shatter against the physical iron of your contracted muscles beneath it. It drastically closes the gap between top-tier Haraki users and everyone else.
It is so deeply practical, so fundamentally sound, that the main heroes of the story literally had to steal it to survive. Despite being overshadowed in the overarching narrative by shiny new Hakaki powers, the legacy of Rokushiki lives on right inside the protagonist's crew.
This is a beautiful piece of narrative irony. The heroes did not defeat this authoritarian, mass-produced system by simply ignoring it or overpowering it with magic. They defeated it by reverse engineering it.
Yeah.
They watched their oppressors learn the mechanics of their suffering and integrated those mechanics into their own repertoires.
Think about Luffy at Eni's lobby. He's getting absolutely destroyed by the speed of Blue Eno. But Luffy isn't just a brawler, he's a combat genius. He watches Blue Eno's feet, he sees the physical mechanism kicking the ground dozens of times in a fraction of a second to trigger Zoro. Now, Luffy hadn't done the years of agonizing physical conditioning to withstand that kind of biological toll on his legs. If a normal person tried that, their blood vessels would burst.
But Luffy has a unique biological loophole. His cardiovascular system is entirely made of stretching, expanding rubber.
Exactly.
He figures out that he can forcibly pump his own blood to accelerate his metabolism, heavily oxygenating his muscles, which is a technique he calls gear second. His rubber veins can handle the immense hydrostatic pressure that would literally explode a normal human's heart.
Which is wild.
Because of his anatomy, he skips the years of torture and perfectly replicates the explosive kinetic speed of Soru on the spot. He borrows the industrial machinery of the government and fuels it with his own chaotic physiology.
And then there's Sanji. Sanji's integration of this system wasn't born of tactical observation. It was purely born of desperation and trauma.
Right, during the time skip.
Yeah, during the 2-year time skip, Sanji is trapped on the Okama Kingdom Island. He spends 2 entire years running for his life, day and night, from inhabitants who never stop chasing him. He runs till he reaches the edge of the island, he runs until he is trapped at the ocean, and when he literally runs out of solid ground, pure survival instinct forces him to kick the air.
He figures out the compression mechanics of Geppo, renaming his version the Skywalk. And what is fascinating here is the biomechanical difference in Sanji's variation. Sanji's entire fighting style is based exclusively on leg strength.
So he's already primed for it.
Exactly. Therefore, his lower body muscle density is fundamentally more developed than any of the government assassins. His skywalk isn't just a replica, it is vastly superior. He kicks the air with such explosive force that the compressed platform he creates propels him faster and further than a standard Geppo.
He even takes the physics a step further. He uses it underwater, calling it the Blue Walk. He kicks the water so hard, he creates a localized vacuum, allowing him to sprint through the crushing pressure of the ocean depths at the speed of a fishman. He took a rigid, authoritarian technique designed for mindless assassins and turned it into the ultimate tool for freedom and survival.
It is a profound statement on the nature of combat in this universe. In an era entirely dominated by the genetic lottery of Conqueror's Haki and the unpredictable, reality-bending magic of awakened Devil Fruits, Rokushiki remains the most aesthetically pleasing, highly adaptable, and creatively rewarding combat system. It bridges the gap between the mortal and the magical.
It really does. We've unpacked how the combat meta shifted from tactical brains to raw brawn, how a martial art born of pure physical agony creates an industrial assembly line of power, and how the biomechanics of that very system patch every single hole left behind by magic. Rokushiki is the ultimate proof that relentless hard work, biological taxation, and unforgiving discipline can allow a mortal to challenge gods. It's not just a footnote in the story, it is the bedrock of true physical strength.
And it forces us to examine our own preferences and the narratives we consume. It leaves us with a lingering question about what truly moves us.
Yeah, that's a great point.
When you engage with these massive epics, whether it's an anime, a sprawling cinematic universe, or a dense fantasy novel, do you find yourself more captivated by the characters who are gifted from birth with world-shattering magical destinies? Or is your imagination truly captured by the ones who have to bleed, sweat, and break their own bodies over and over again just to earn a single seat at the table?
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to the latest update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end, and see you in the next video.